of advice do you have to homeowners?
Practicing that preparedness, starting the conversation now is always going to be a benefit to any association out there.
And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we have managed more than $1 billion in recovery. We got a great show today. We have an incredible guest. I can't wait to have her on to talk about important issues regarding your windows. As you can see, the topic is, do your windows perform under pressure? Well, it couldn't be any more relevant of a topic right now with all the tropics and the Gulf and everything heating up. But before we get there, I want to take us back a little bit. I want to talk about these 10 years at GlobalPro, and a little bit about our history, and a relevant story about a condominium association located over in Naples that was devastated by Hurricane Wilma. And wouldn't you guess, it was devastated by Wilma. The windows were damaged. The windows, doors, the roofs, interiors and the exterior finishes and all the adjacent areas to those windows and doors and roofs were damaged by this storm. Of no surprise, the insurance company comes out, does an investigation, and says, wait, your damages, they're below your deductible. We hear that often. It's either the associations and their brokers working together get some sort of deductible phobia and they just make an assumption that it is, or an insurance company just decides, hey, you're below your deductible. But the reality is that the association didn't just accept what the insurance company determined was below deductible. They wanted to know more. So they hired me. They hired us to go out there. They hired GlobalPro to investigate these damages further. Through that investigation, we discovered all kinds of sort of damages because we looked closer at these issues. We looked closer at the windows and doors. We looked at the connections to the buildings. We looked at the interior. We walked all of the units, the entirety of the building. One thing we realized the insurance company never did. We also engaged an engineer. An engineer came out on behalf of these associations and walked with us and investigated and did testing of these windows. They did pressure and water testing, all to determine where the damage was, to confirm the conditions at the property. All was done on behalf of the association for their claim by us, right? So this is Hurricane Wilma. This is an insurance claim where an insurance company determined it was below deductible. Here we are spending tens of thousands of dollars to investigate a claim, working with the association, going unit by unit. Now here we represented 5 of the 6 buildings in this community. One of the buildings was represented by a different public adjuster. Us as insurance experts, coverage experts, and analyzing, doing what we can for the association, making sure that they have the information they need and that the insurance company is getting the details that they need to pay the claim, worked with these 5 associations through a claims process and working with their insurance company to obtain multi-million-dollar net payments from their insurance company. We did this in less than 8 months. By the time our associations, those 5s, received their checks, the 6th association was just receiving its first draft of evaluation. It was a first draft of evaluation because it was wrong. It needed a peer review, and we did that peer review. We reviewed those documents. We went through that information. We brought our engineer back out to the property and investigated it further and obtained the same result for that association. But they had to wait nearly 10 months to get the same recovery that we were able to get for the other 5 associations in far less time. That's what makes GlobalPro what it is today. That's what the GlobalPro difference is. That's what these associations learn firsthand, and what your condominium association can learn as well if it's impacted by prior storms or current storms that are forming off in the Gulf and are going to impact those areas. It's a short little story about how going it alone and trying to work with your broker most often doesn't work. It's an important story about making sure the people that you hire have the expertise and the resources in order to do the proper policy analysis and investigation for your damages. It's truly the GlobalPro difference. And it's what, again, has made us successful and what I like to celebrate every time I come onto the show as we count down to 10 years, because GlobalPro has made a difference for so many community associations and businesses. And we welcome you to call us first. That's what we talk about constantly. You see the logo up in the corner there. Call us first. Remember that, because if you call us first, you avoid the over 2.5, 3-year delay that it took for these associations, the 5 associations we helped in less than 8 months get multi-million-dollar payments. Had they called us first right after the loss, as we talked about in the last episode, we talked about the tale of the 2 community associations right next to each other. One took less than 4 months to get $4.5 million. The other one waited years to do the same thing because they tried doing it themselves. Just another example, another highlight of what we can do. But where did that multi-million dollars come from? The multi-million dollars came mostly because of the windows, the door openings, the roof, the fenestration openings, which is kind of a technical, fancy term that a lot of us experts like to use to describe the cladded openings, where you have glass and other types of materials to protect the interior of your building, right? These are supposed to keep the water out, if you will, right? We want to make sure that. But the Gulf and the Atlantic continue to heat up. We just saw Tropical Storm Fred just skate up the northeast coastline and cause tremendous amount of flooding. You see Tennessee, it's just reeling from it. These communities are picking up from it. They're trying to rebound, but there's tremendous amount of loss of life. It's just a constant reminder of staying prepared, making sure that you are doing what you can as community association business to be prepared so that your association, if it does suffer damage, can rebuild more quickly, right? We want to make sure that you have what you need in order to do that. But don't confuse rebuilding with recovering. Remember, in your insurance policy, as we've discussed before, recovering is getting the money, rebuilding is spending the money. So we want to make sure you recover the money before you spend the money to rebuild. Really important, because you don't know how much money you have to spend. And when we're dealing with these 40-year recertifications in the wake of the tragedy of Champlain South Tower and the changes that are coming in the building code and the materials, you want to make sure that you don't overextend yourself as a community association. We talked about transparency in the last episode, making sure that your unit owners and other fellow board members understand your direction that you're trying to take these things. We practice that here at GlobalPro, not only with our own team, but with our clients. That's why we do this show. We want to share with you free information. We want to give you information you can use. That's what's really, really important. But we're not out of the woods here. We're getting into the active part of the season, and we have Invest 99 out there, Lower Caribbean area, trajectory, Texas, Louisiana, and possibly impacting the Florida Panhandle yet again, right? So let's stay on our toes. Let's stay prepared to help you stay on your toes and to be prepared. Our next guest has a tremendous amount of expertise, knowledge, and experience as an architect and working for a corporation that we talked a little bit about with another representative, Ron. You might remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about pool decks and waterproofing, things like that. I want to bring on our next guest, Samantha Tole with Pecora, to talk about windows, to talk about the other parts of the buildings, so that our audience is educated as we, again, we're facing the low pressure system. We have the Invest area 99 is threatening. So welcome, Samantha. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for having me on. You're a tough act to follow. My goodness.
Well, I appreciate that, Samantha. But I know right before we started the show here, we had a great laugh. We talked a lot about some of the important issues that are impacting the industry. In your role as and I'm going to try to get all this, it's a bit of a mouthful, as the Southeastern Structural and Architectural Glazing Territorial Manager. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did. It's tough for me. It's tough for me to say too.
So talk to us a little about, what does that boil down to? What does that mean? I know your territory is Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas. In your role as the territory manager, let me summarize it by saying that. What types of clients are you dealing with? What is your focus?
So my focus is I deal with the manufacturers, so curtain wall and window manufacturers, trying to get them to do better practices in their manufacturing. And then another key part of my role is to work with specifiers and engineers, because we understand our products. We understand the capabilities of our products. And at the company, at Pecora, we have so many different products that do a multitude of different things. It's great to be able to get the message out to teach engineers that there are newer, bigger, and better products that can perform better, and then put that down to the manufacturers as well. So hopefully they can take that on and create better, safer, long-lasting products as well. It's a tough thing to do.
So let's remind our audience, talk a little bit about, because we have some new people I can see that are listening in here. What is Pecora? What do you guys do? What do you manufacture? You've been around for a long time, 1800s, so you've had a long history there. So tell us a little bit about Pecora.
So we started out basically with paints and varnishes, and as time has gone on, we started working with silicones, and silicone has really become the core of our business. We obviously do other things like deck coatings. We also do weather barriers and that type of thing. But everything we produce and create, we're up in Pennsylvania, everything we do and create is to promote the safety and the longevity of a building. So weather barriers, coatings, and sealants. So we do everything from silicones to urethanes to hybrids and that type of thing, because that's how technology is going. You go from the simpler product, and then we tweak the chemistry and we turn it into a hybrid. That's what we work on too.
So I want to get a little bit into that, and I want to talk a little bit about the details. But before we talk there, I want to talk about, because we do have this Invest 99. We had Tropical Storm Fred and several others that have impacted the Caribbean and the coastal areas where a lot of our clients are, and a lot of interest is in your products, obviously. And you talked about windows, glazing systems, things like that. Why do windows fail during a storm? What happens to that window? What causes the failure?
Well, the storm is the worst case scenario of everything. You've got wind-driven rain. So wind-driven rain is rain under pressure being forced and at that building, and water will find every nook and cranny that it physically possibly can. If there's a hole, you best be sure during wind with the wind-driven rain, it'll force that water into every hole. So you've got everything from openings, from outlets, light switches on the outside, lights, sconces, doors. All of those things are openings for the water. So if a window is not sealed properly, if a window is old, if the window hasn't had the correct fenestration, the correct flashing around that window, that provides an opening for that rough opening there for water to go in and seep into the inside of the building. There's a lot of moving parts to a window. It's pieces of metal, pieces of vinyl put together. They're engineered to fit together really tightly. Well, if they don't seal all of those inside-outside joints, if your perimeter seals, your first seals, your secondary seals are not done correctly, it's an opportunity for water to sneak its way in. And it's kind of like a silent killer. Yeah. It sneaks in. You don't see it. You don't hear it during a storm. It sneaks in and it gets into that wall cavity. And maybe a few weeks later, there's a funky smell in the building. You don't really know why, but that water is pulled all the way in through that window and created a ton of damage at the base of the sill, and even gone down to the floor joists. The walls get damaged.
And you brought up the term wind-driven rain, which is something that's new to, I'd say, a lot of people these days, and something that was born within an insurance policy and now has been associated with so many things. Because before, people would just say, I had hurricane damage. Now, through insurance, we've seen them separate what otherwise would be hurricane damage and now call it wind-driven rain, even though it was caused by a hurricane. And you talked about some maintenance issues. Obviously, those are some things that buildings need to particularly pay attention to, especially in the wake of Champlain South Tower, where there's a lot of questions about how the property was maintained. But we're talking about performance issues during a storm, because when it rains every day, our windows aren't leaking all the time. But when that hurricane hits, suddenly our windows and doors are in fact failing, right? So, and what we've seen is where we've seen the frames literally separate due to the flexing and the back and forth of the winds and the pressures, and you have those 3-second bursts, and you have all these, and then you have flying debris, right? You always have to, just because you have impact windows doesn't mean it's going to stop an object from breaking the window. It's intended to obviously protect you from it, and you get certain insurance credits, but those windows still can fail themselves. So all important things, and you did bring up a lot of maintenance issues that I think people need to pay particular attention to now if you haven't been impacted by a storm. And if you have been impacted by the storm, make sure that you distinguish between what is maintenance and what is actually being caused or the damages being caused by the storm are. And if you have maintenance logs or meeting minutes about the maintenance that you've been doing and things like that, as you're making your claim, it's really important that you point to those things when you're making your insurance claim with your insurance company, so they just can't chalk it all up to being some sort of maintenance issue. We don't want to see that happening. So what should an association look for when they're making temporary repairs? Let's say they've suffered the damages. Are there certain products that Pecora sells or that they can use to either better maintain their building, to protect them from storm damage, the stuff, kind of some of the stuff that you talked about? And also, can you use those same products after the windows and doors have failed from the storm to protect it from further damage? And we call that in insurance world mitigation. Is because, and I'll preface this with saying, you and I talked a little bit about the difference between silicones and other products that we're seeing used. So talk to us a little bit about those products. Why is that distinction important?
Okay, so there are a multitude of products you can use. You can use acrylics, you can use urethanes, you can use silicones, you can use silo-terminated polyethers, STPUs, or those type of products. There's multiple different products you can use. But when you're talking the outside of the building, you're talking a part of a building that's going to be affected by UV. Daylight. Daylight is one of the biggest issues. It destroys products. It causes them to fall apart. One of the products that does not get affected by sunlight is silicone. Silicone is the second most abundant forming element on the earth. In fact, 90% of the earth's crust is made of silicon, right? Si, you'll see it on the element table if you remember when you did chemistry at school. So it's widely available. You find it in rocks, in sand, so on and so forth. So it's very abundant, and through the different manufacturing process will make the silicone, and that silicone, once it's made, it's basically inert. So when you're using it on the exterior of a building, it's inert to all the forces of nature. Mother Nature can throw pretty much anything at silicone and it will withstand it. Now, not all silicones are made equally. Some have non-staining properties. Some are highly elastomeric. There's different classes. You get a class 25, which doesn't move as much. That's a structural silicone. You get a class 50, which has got a little bit more give. You've got high impact silicones. There are multiple different types of silicones. So when it comes to designing these buildings and choosing what goes into these buildings, that's where I get involved, because not always do specifiers and architects and manufacturers really understand the product that they're putting into these units. And so it's key that we look at the performance, what that building's going to do, what type of windows they're going to do, where it's facing. Is it directly facing the ocean? Is it going to get the brunt of the force, positive pressure? And that's how we select what products that go on the building. And silicone is really one of the only products that can withstand everything that Mother Nature wants to throw at it.
And why I think this is an important topic, particularly in the wake of the tragedy of Champlain South Tower, is that a lot of associations are deciding to do concrete restoration, stucco repair projects, fortify the structure or the exterior of their buildings to protect it from water infiltration, either into the concrete systems, and which could lead to column failures and wall failures and things like that. So I think this is a particularly important topic for associations that are kicking off these projects or are rushing into their 40-year certification to think about this. There's one thing to check the box to say you've done it. It's another thing to say that you've done it and you've done it right and done it well and did your research. So as board members, it's sometimes hard to digest all this information. Where's it coming from? Is it valid? Is it this? Whatever else. And then it's also easy to appease your fellow unit owners by saving money. But you may be, again, kicking a can. And if we've learned anything, kicking a can can lead to tragedy and bad results. So what we want to do is we want to take a step back and educate ourselves that's why I'm so excited to have Samantha on with the Pecora group, and why we, again, having another representative from the company here to talk about their products, the performance of their products, and what distinguishes the different types of materials. You just heard her talk about different types of actual silicone. Did you know that there's that many silicones to choose from? And Samantha, you and I talked a little bit before we kicked off the show about when I walk into these lobbies and I see these new improvement projects and stuff like that, and we've all seen them, and you as an architect, I know I'm sure pay particular attention to this. You always see a mock-up of the window, but you never see a mock-up of the window as it's going to be installed, right? You don't see the type of silicone or the silicone they're going to use to attach the window frame to the stucco system or to the structural components of the building and how that's going to work. How do you suggest an association approach that, considering the tragedy that we saw and considering the attention there is now, finally, for the structural integrity of these buildings? Is there a recommendation you have for associations as it relates to mock-ups or anything, and they're going through the decision-making process, things they should be asking their engineers maybe?
Luckily, where you are now, that tower was an older building, but luckily where you're located, you have NOAs. So you have very strict building codes there. Everything down to the screws in the windows has to be tested. They all have to go through testing. Even for Florida, you have to go through Florida product approvals, which are very, very strict. Those Florida product approvals, by the way, and NOAs make it very difficult for companies like me who are trying to grow our business with manufacturers, because when they test and these windows go through rigorous testing, everything has to be exact and pass every one of these standards, which are pretty tough, in order to pass and be able to be used. If they test and they don't test with your product, you can't swap it out for a different one. Just say they can't find the product, it's not being manufactured right now, this is a supply chain issue, you can't swap it out. So it's very, very hard. All that work goes into the window, but like you said with the installation, it doesn't. So that's where best practices have to come in. Manufacturers such as us, we go out and we train and we work with installers and companies to promote the best practices. Now, we would never warrant a job. We give warranties, right? We'll give 20-year warranties. How cool is that? And building owners should know that. We can give you this killer warranty that will protect you and your building, but you have to make sure that that window is installed as per manufacturer's guidelines. And we're very, very strict. We do adhesion tests. We do pull tests where we check to see if that silicone is adhered properly. And we have all our manufacturer's reps that go out free of charge for building owners to make sure that your building is being put together correctly. So I would say to any building owner or association, always contact the manufacturers. Don't just listen to your installer, because they're going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to tell you everything's okay. Sorry, but they're going to tell you that. Go to the manufacturer, because for us, it's black and white. We will tell you whether it's compatible. We will tell you if you need to use a primer. We will tell you, no, that joint's too big. This won't work, because we don't want our product to fail.
I think that's
we provide you with a very strong warranty, but you have to do things correctly, and that stops the propensity for failure. So come to us for help.
I think that's solid advice, and I definitely think it's something that a lot of associations absolutely don't do. They go to the engineer and they expect the engineer to have gone to the manufacturers on their behalf. But make these decisions. Remember, this is your building, this is your home, these are your things, it's your money being spent here. So don't just rely on someone else to spend it for you or to get that information. Go to them. They're inviting you to speak to them directly. Why would you not do that? Why would you not want to know about this? You're investing complimentary, and you're investing millions of dollars into these things a lot of times when you're doing these types of projects. So it's really important. You heard Samantha talk about the strict, the codes, particularly in Florida, where you have the NOAs, the Notice of Acceptance, and the standards, the high standard. Florida was at one time touted as having the gold standard, the standard that pretty much anywhere in the world wants to follow we were strictest, right, in Florida. Florida was going to be it. It was the gold standard, and it was what it's going to do. So when your windows fail in a storm, bringing you back to the storm conversation, understand your windows went through that process. They're not just going to fail just because they fail, right? They're going to fail for a reason. And a lot of times it's not because of maintenance, it's because of the conditions of the storm. But you got to look at the storm to determine that. And you got to look at all the information. You got to look at the products that were being used. You got to read the NOAs. You have to understand how these things all fit together. All this information is so important. It is, as a board or an association, you're going through this design process, and you have someone like Samantha, and you had met with that person, and you sat down. You know where that information is. You know how to get it. You now understand those products. I think it's an awesome point, Samantha. I think you bring up a really good point. I think it's something that I wish a lot of associations would do more of. While you're having the dog and pony shows with all the engineering firms, right? Why not have the same dog and pony show with the manufacturers that you've decided to use their products? You might as well use it. Just like buying a car, right? You didn't just decide to just buy a car. Most people go out and test drive the car. I think the talking to the manufacturer is somewhat similar, right? You want to go out, meet them. And I know some of the does your company, do you do product demonstrations or on-site visits? Yeah, of course.
Always.
So yeah.
And during just say you've got a building that's being built from the ground up, we come out for pre-construction meetings. We start the warranty process. At that point, then every X amount of lineal foot of that building of silicone that's being run, we say you need to do a pull test, and we like to come out and inspect that building. And there's multiple ones of me throughout the whole country. Their names are kind of shorter. Their technical names are shorter. But they're incredibly knowledgeable. We have to go through an immense amount of training, and we come out and we look at that building. A lot of the time, we're worse than the building inspector because we expect things to be done correctly. And it's invaluable. I have 30 years of experience. I'm old and I'm used to this. I've seen it all. I've witnessed it all. And a lot of the time, it's installer error. Many of the time, it's how the installation hasn't been done exactly correctly or to our guidelines. The boss puts a different type of product on the truck in the morning, and they're using that to install these windows. They're not used to it. Or they're installing it when the windows when it's still damp, the morning dew is still on there. Well, what's silicone going to do? It's moisture cured. So the silicone's falling out of the windows because they're putting it onto a wet surface. We see all this. We know how it works, the technical ins and outs of every one of our products. So whether you choose to go to the dark side and use another manufacturer other than us, every manufacturer has one of me and multiple others that know the products inside and out and are your best advocate to making sure that you get the best product and best end result for your building.
No, I think it's great. I think one thing I hope our audience takes away from this is the idea of doing something like that. It's been suggested. Why not do it? So Samantha, how can our audience find out more about Pecora and your services for the territory in which you manage?
Okay, so they just go to Pecora.com, Pecora.com. There's a ton of information. We've got a blog on there. You scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it'll have your distributor and your representative bar there, and you just type in whichever location you're in, and then you can find us that way. But the page is incredibly interesting, the way that our marketing team have put it together. We have a lot of case studies, so you can also go in and research case studies. We also have a killer technical department, and actually you can call and contact them and it goes straight to their cell phones. So we're only a call away. We're not one of these big companies that hide behind a 1-800 number. All our numbers there go directly to us. And so we're very easily contacted. We can't hide, basically.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for joining us today. Definitely a wealth of knowledge and information. This has been great. Obviously, this and other recovery reports are available on our YouTube channel, so we want to make sure that everyone checks it out. Ron, who was on 2 weeks ago talking about pool decks and waterproofing and everything else, you now have a two-part series with Pecora talking about their products, their recommendations, what community association business owners should be doing. So again, Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we'll be in touch, and Samantha is in Georgia on her horse farm. We talked about her passion for that, and I hope to visit you sometime soon to check out those horses. I definitely think it's fantastic. So thanks again, Samantha. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right, guys, that was an awesome show. Great recommendation. I mean, I think the takeaway there is contact your manufacturers. If you're a community association, you're going through the 40-year recertification process, or if you're deciding on an engineer and a contractor, why not decide on a manufacturer too? Why not get a little bit more confident about the materials that are going to be specified by your engineers, by your contractors? Ask the right questions. Go out and touch and feel and see, visit other properties where these materials have been used. I'm sure Pecora and their amazing team will invite you to their manufacturing facility. We'll do on-site demonstrations. We'll allow you to experience their service and their products. So reach out to them. Reach out to other manufacturers too. How are the different window companies working with companies like Pecora? What are the advantages? Understand this. I mean, break it down. Get into the details of these things. Think about the future. I know it's sometimes hard as investors and condo units and things like that, and you bought a unit based on a performance on a spreadsheet. Well, things are changing. People are buyers are absolutely educating themselves more. They're going to want to know this information. So as a seller or an investor, if you knew that your building is being protected by a particular type of material, or that you're going through this process, it's more to talk about. It's more of a reason why they're going to want to buy your unit, even as an investor. Some awesome information. But as all of you know, we're counting down 10 years. We're going to continue to deliver information you can use here at GlobalPro. We've managed more than $1 billion, and we're going to keep adding to that number. We're helping all the folks up in the Northeast, and we're going to be tracking the storms in the Gulf Coast area as things kind of heat up as we get deep into this hurricane season. So stay ready, stay prepared. As always, hit the subscribe button, like us and follow us on all the social media to make sure you get the notifications and updates about this show and other things that we're doing here at GlobalPro. Hey, and if you're talented, you're looking for a job, you want an attractive team like us, you want to be in a progressive company that's making a difference, that's changing things, check out our website. Go to getglobalpro.com/careers. On there, you'll find a bunch of different open positions. We are growing, we're expanding. As I announced just recently on social media, we're headed to Dallas, Texas. We couldn't be more excited about it. So we hope you join us on that journey. If you're looking for change, you're looking for something new, you're looking for a company that is diverse in its offerings, we are the place for you. So again, check it out, getglobalpro.com/careers. Bunch of different job openings on there, and we'll see you next week on the Recovery Report Live, same place, same time. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Recovery Report Live.